They say words can't break you, but when she called me dead weight, something inside me snapped. I could have stayed silent. Instead, I rose. And what came next, no one saw coming. Words have power. Sometimes it's not the volume, but the precision that cuts deepest. When someone you've stood by, supported, or simply trusted calls you dead weight, it doesn't just sting, it destabilizes your entire sense of worth. That one phrase can echo louder than years of silence, and in a single instant, redefine how you see yourself. Being called dead weight isn't just an insult, it's a judgment, a brutal declaration that you're a burden, someone who holds others back rather than pushes them forward. It suggests that your presence is not only unwanted, but actively damaging. It implies that all the effort, care, or quiet contributions you've made were meaningless. For anyone, especially someone already fighting internal battles or struggling to prove their value, hearing those words can create an emotional fracture that feels impossible to heal. This moment becomes more painful when it comes from someone whose opinion mattered, someone who had influence in your life, who you believed saw your potential, your heart, your effort. Instead, they reduced you to a liability, a mistake, a weight dragging them down. That realization doesn't just cause pain, it sparks a flood of questions. Have I really done nothing worthwhile? Is this how everyone sees me? Is there even a place for me here? It's not just the insult that hurts, it's the timing, the setting, the tone. Maybe it was said casually in a moment of anger or with a cold smile that showed they meant every syllable. Maybe it was thrown out in front of others, stripping away any remaining dignity. Or perhaps it came during a private conversation when defenses were down and trust was high, making the betrayal even sharper, that message sent. Moment becomes a loop in the mind, replaying over and over. No matter how much logic tries to dismiss it or pride tries to ignore it, the phrase lodges itself in the subconscious, and for a while it stays there, festering, growing roots, becoming part of the internal dialogue. You start seeing signs where none exist, interpreting silence as agreement and kindness as pity. The world feels colder, and every small failure seems like proof that they were right. But sometimes it's precisely this kind of deep emotional blow that becomes a catalyst. That phrase, dead weight, doesn't just cause pain. It plants a challenge. It forces a choice. Accept that label or destroy it. Stay buried under it, or rise and redefine what you carry and what you're worth. The moment someone calls you dead weight is a turning point. It's the moment before everything changes. And while it might be born from pain, it carries within it the seed of power. The label dead weight didn't appear out of nowhere. It was placed without understanding the full story, without acknowledging the quiet burdens that had been carried for far too long. Everyone has a different kind of weight, some physical, some emotional, some invisible to everyone but deeply felt within. Behind every person dismissed as unworthy, unhelpful, or unproductive, there's a history of silent endurance that often goes unnoticed. There are struggles that aren't broadcast, the constant effort to stay afloat financially, the mental battles that rage daily beneath a calm exterior, the pressure of expectations, often unspoken but always present, the sacrifices made behind the scenes to support others, even when it meant putting personal goals on hold. These things don't show up in grand gestures or loud declarations. They show up in consistency, in resilience, and in quiet persistence. Carrying the weight of failure is heavy. So is carrying the weight of comparison, especially in environments where success is measured only by visible outcomes. Society rewards the loud victories and overlooks the silent efforts. A person who is learning, growing slowly, or healing doesn't always look impressive, but their progress is no less real. The internal fight to get up each day and try again, even when things aren't working, is a form of strength that often goes unrecognized. Then there's the emotional labor, the weight of holding others up while neglecting one's own needs. Offering support, being present, listening, encouraging, forgiving. These actions may seem small or insignificant from the outside, but they require emotional capacity and mental strength. Over time, constantly being the one who holds things together without acknowledgement can become exhausting. And when that quiet effort is dismissed as being a burden, the pain doubles. There's also the guilt, the sense of always falling short, even when trying hard. The nagging feeling that no matter how much is done, it's never enough. That somehow others move faster, achieve more, shine brighter, and the comparison eats away at self-esteem. This weight doesn't come from laziness or lack of ambition. It comes from the pressure of unmet potential and the fear of being seen as a disappointment. The truth is, many people carry invisible loads. They wear smiles while battling anxiety. They show up while grieving losses no one knows about. They offer help while feeling like they're drowning themselves. These weights don't make a person weak, they make them human. But in a world obsessed with performance, it's easy to overlook the depth behind the surface. Being called dead weight hurts most when it's thrown at someone who's been carrying more than their fair share in silence. The weight wasn't just physical or financial, it was emotional, mental, and deeply personal. And the most painful part wasn't carrying it, it was realizing no one ever noticed. There comes a point when words that once wounded begin to lose their power, not because they were forgotten, but because they triggered a shift. Being called dead weight wasn't just an insult, it was a wake-up call. The sting of those words lingered, but eventually, pain turned into clarity. The choice became simple: remain defined by someone else's opinion, or redefine what that opinion could never see. Change doesn't always start with a loud declaration. Often, it begins quietly, with a decision that something needs to be different. A subtle mental shift occurs, one that replaces self-pity with self-respect. The mind starts asking new questions. What am I doing with my time? What habits are keeping me stuck? What am I capable of if I stop waiting for approval? The answers don't come all at once, but the questions themselves start building a new foundation. This shift is rooted in accountability, not revenge. The goal isn't to prove someone wrong, it's to prove oneself right. It begins with an honest assessment of where things went off track. Maybe there were areas of life that had been neglected: health, goals, discipline, or mindset. Acknowledging those without judgment allows room for growth. The focus moves away from blame and toward responsibility. Discipline becomes the new language. Instead of reacting to negativity, energy is redirected into building routines, learning new skills, improving mentally and physically. Small wins begin to replace self-doubt. A morning run, reading a few pages of a book, tackling tasks without procrastination. These actions seem small but begin to stack up. They slowly rebuild confidence, not through external validation, but through personal evidence of change. The switch inside is not about anger, it's about resolve. It's the understanding that nothing changes until action becomes consistent. There's no overnight transformation, no instant reward. But over time, the gap between the old self and the emerging one grows. Progress becomes addictive. And with each step forward, the sting of the past fades, not because it didn't matter, but because it no longer defines the present. More importantly, the mindset begins to evolve. Doubt is replaced by belief. Instead of questioning value, there's a quiet confidence that it's being built from the ground up. The desire to be seen or validated by others diminishes, replaced by the internal satisfaction of showing up for oneself. The switch is not dramatic, it's intentional. It's the moment someone stops accepting the version of themselves shaped by others' limitations. It's the beginning of a personal evolution driven not by bitterness, but by the need to rise, not to be admired, but to be free. Growth done in silence often delivers the loudest results. When transformation begins internally, it builds strength that no one can see until it becomes undeniable. The rise isn't about noise or attention, it's about momentum. What starts with small shifts in mindset and behavior gradually turns into a complete evolution. And those who once dismissed or doubted are often the last to notice the change. But the most stunned when they finally do. True progress doesn't rely on proving others wrong. It's about proving to oneself that limitations were never permanent. The rise is steady and grounded in discipline. Habits become consistent. Mind becomes focused. Time starts getting invested wisely in health, in purpose, in learning, in building. The energy that was once wasted on self-doubt or pleasing others is now funneled into self-improvement. Confidence, no longer based on opinions, begins to emerge. From action, external results begin to reflect internal growth. Physical health improves. Skills sharpen. Opportunities start showing up, not by luck, but through preparation and readiness. The person once seen as dead weight becomes the one moving with direction, purpose, and clarity. And perhaps most importantly, there's no need to announce the change. It speaks for itself in posture, presence, and performance. What makes this rise unexpected is that it doesn't match the image others had created. People who underestimate someone rarely prepare for their comeback. They assume the labels they assigned are permanent. That's why the transformation shocks them. It challenges their assumptions and forces them to reassess their judgments. The person they once looked down on now stands in control, stronger, sharper, and self-assured. But this growth doesn't stem from revenge. It stems from self-respect. There's no desire to belittle or retaliate. The goal was never to impress others, but to become someone who no longer needs external validation. That independence, that unshakable sense of self, becomes the ultimate mark of transformation. It is the quiet power that follows someone who has faced disrespect, processed the pain, and turned it into fuel. The rise also brings clarity about relationships, boundaries, and energy. There's no more room for those who diminish growth or speak from ego. Instead of trying to earn approval, the focus shifts to protecting peace and continuing to build. Success becomes a personal journey, not measured by applause, but by the fulfillment that comes from alignment with purpose. Those who once doubted may now offer praise, admiration, or even regret. But by the time they recognize the rise, their opinion no longer holds weight. The person who once hurt from words like dead weight has evolved past the need for closure or validation. They've become someone defined not by past insults, but by present strength. The rise was never for them. It was for the self. And that makes it unforgettable. Some lessons aren't taught through confrontation. They're taught through evolution. When someone underestimates another, labels them as weak or incapable, they rarely anticipate the quiet strength that follows. The real lesson isn't found in arguments or explanations. It's delivered in the form of undeniable transformation. Watching someone become everything they were told they'd never be is the kind of realization that lingers far longer than any spoken response. The power of personal growth lies in its impact. It redefines relationships, reshapes dynamics, and reverses perceptions. What once seemed like dependency now looks like discipline. What once appeared as weakness becomes clarity and confidence. The individual who was once considered a liability becomes the one others look to for inspiration, guidance, or even forgiveness. That shift forces the observer to reconsider everything they thought they knew. For someone who casually labeled another as dead weight, seeing that person rise, without resentment, without seeking revenge, delivers the most impactful message. Not because of what's said, but because of what's shown. There's no need to address the past directly when the present speaks volumes. The lesson becomes crystal clear. Never mistake someone's temporary struggle for a permanent limitation. The memory of what was said can't be erased. It remains, but now it serves a different purpose. It's no longer a source of pain. It becomes a reminder of distance traveled. Every assumption that was made, every insult that was delivered, becomes part of the backdrop against which strength and success now stand out more vividly. The transformation becomes undeniable, and in that recognition, there is silence, not because there's nothing to say, but because words are no longer enough to cover the gap between who someone was assumed to be and who they became. This lesson extends beyond a single person. It challenges others to think more carefully about how they view people, especially those in difficult seasons. It reminds them that value isn't always visible, and growth doesn't always follow a timeline. Underestimating someone isn't just a failure of perception. It's a missed opportunity to support and believe in them before their rise makes it impossible to ignore. There's also a shift in power. Once someone stops seeking validation, they become immune to the same voices that once had control over their self-image. The opinions of others lose their grip. Respect is no longer something begged for, it's something naturally commanded. And when the tables turn like this, the very people who once doubted are left in a space of quiet reflection, often forced to reckon with their own insecurity, impatience, or lack of vision. In the end, the lesson isn't about payback. It's about proving that growth is the best response, and success rooted in self-respect is the most lasting kind. The ones who doubted, dismissed, or disrespected will remember the transformation, not because they were told to, but because it left them with no other choice.